Rolex doesn't lose its value ever, even if you wear it, right? Similar case in wine. So your Lafite, your Latour, your Domaine Romani Conti, Ponso.
Well, Michael, we had a good response to the previous video on investing in wine. So I kind of want to take it to the next level as a more experienced investor in wine. And thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
I
Nice to see you
really,
again.
I learned a lot. Yeah. Now I got to get back around to the tasting, I guess. Maybe I'm not doing that right, but there's a lot to, when I started doing a bit of a deep dive, there's a lot to learn here. And, I can see that you could take some losses fairly quickly too if you're not doing it right. So I think
Yeah.
your input is critical to really make sure we don't have those missteps, because it can be quite costly. Investing in real estate, yes, that's always. But in wine, it's something new for a lot of people, and I think there's a process in that you can guide us through that can really help us be a little bit more successful instead of the poke and hope method. So let's say I've got my feet and my toe in the water. I bought a few rounds of wine, but now I'm like, I kind of want to take it to the next level. I want to start buying more cases. I want to, I just really want to, put 10, 15, 20,000 or more into it. How do I get there? What are my steps?
Right. Well, to expand on what we talked about in the first episode, uh, hopefully you'll have honed in on a region, or at this point, a couple of regions, and you're in tune with the wine, the outstanding wines of that region. So, going back to California, the cabs, obviously, Napa cabs. You go to Bordeaux, it's the Bordeaux blends. You go to Burgundy, it's Pinot, Oregon, Pinot. Australia, pockets of Syrah and other pockets of cabs. So once you've dialed in those regions that, well, one, hopefully you like, or if you're looking at a pure investment standpoint, have a history of producing quality wines with an upwards trend in pricing. So the regions I spit out there are great regions to kind of get in touch with in regards to investing, because that's the staple investment regions. Definitely difficult to wrap your head around some of those, especially Burgundy. I would say Burgundy is the toughest one. It's been demised so many times. There's this funny law. It comes from when Napoleon was reigning over France, and he made it so every time you died, all your land gets split equally between your sons and daughters. And so, people are hesitant to sell that land, and people own just a row of vines instead of a whole plot. So Burgundy gets tricky, Bordeaux gets tricky, but straight away, just go to the houses. Despite not owning the land, you'll come to notice a lot of the top wineries will buy their grapes. They definitely have estate grown grapes, but there's hot plots of vineyards that are looking to be purchase the grapes each year. So we did mention this in the first video, but if you can keep track of those plots and see who's buying those grapes for those plots, that's a very high level way of keeping track of who's got what. The top houses though are going to be consistent. I don't know, you think watches, Rolex doesn't lose its value ever, even if you wear it, right? Similar case in wine. So your Lafite, your Latour, your Domaine Romani Conti, Ponso, Screaming Eagle, all those ones, have a high entry level, but are fairly safe in regards to gaining value. And year over year, it's consistent. Consistency aside, though, your growth will be at the market rate growth with those wines. But if you kind of want to get ahead of the curve, there's a great example in Brunello. It's a winery called Terrasol. Terrasol, $50 a bottle, around there 5-10 years ago, but it's trading at around $100 a bottle. Sorry, I'm in Canada, so this is Canadian dollars. Keep in mind. But yeah, the wine saw 100% increase in value in a short period of time. And, a lot of it comes down to, they got maybe not the best reviews in the past, but then all of a sudden they make one good vintage and the next vintage is, double in value. And you'll see it all over the place. But the thing is, as we know, once that review comes out, you're already too late. It's been priced in. So the more you know a region, the more you know the wineries of the region, ideally you go to that winery and you talk to the owners, you see the vision, see what they're working on. And if you can get on board with that, all the better. Some of the exciting regions that I think haven't been fully priced out yet is Oregon, the Willamette Valley, the Pinots there. It's definitely caught up quite a bit to Burgundy in prices for some of the established wineries, but there's still some of those mom and pop ones that are producing world-class wines that aren't trading at, over $100 a bottle. And those cases from the initial vineyard or vintages are going to be worth quite something. So yeah, just don't go too crazy. Don't get too diverse. It's good to be diverse to have a safe portfolio, as we all know, but when it comes to kind of getting ahead of the game and making some serious gains, you got to be ahead of the curve, you got to be ahead of the reviews, and you got to be really in touch with the region, and part of that is going to just come down to understanding the process of making wine, what makes quality grapes, all that stuff. But I'm assuming that if you're this far into it and you're willing to spend tens of thousands of dollars on wine to invest in, hopefully you'll kind of have done your background due diligence there.
How is there a website or an app that we can get on to really start following this? I mean, or do you have to just go to each individual website?
There is some good websites that offer, like indexes of regions and how well they've done, and that's pretty readily available, and they're good resources. But the thing is that's your broad, 20,000 feet above picture, and that's a it outperforms the SPY.
Sure.
It does pretty well. Some of these wines, especially Bordeaux and California, has taken a bit of a hit right now, but consistently they're very consistent. The thing is though, is those wines typically you're looking at thousands of dollars a bottle. So yeah, it depends how much equity you want to put in. But I think for us, if this is you're not your main investment, this is 1% of your worth.
Sure.
You want to have a bit of fun with it and you want to try and get ahead of the curve. I think you should go to the wineries, pick the region, go travel for a week, 2 weeks, book some visits, say, hey, look, like that's realistically the way to do it.
Have a little fun while you're doing it, I guess, right?
Yeah. And also, you'll see these new wineries, they'll spend a ton of CapEx on fitting out the winery. BC is notorious for this. I'm not going to name any names, but there's some beautiful wineries out here. But sometimes you got to stop and scratch your head and go, okay, is this about the wine, what's in the bottle? Or now are we pricing in the cost of the winery into the bottle? And I feel like it's a slippery slope there. So yeah, just be hesitant. And is this a winery that's focused on the wine, or is this a winery that's focused on legacy and brand? Not to say that legacy and brand don't work, but I always like to focus on wineries that focus on the wine, establish a presence, hopefully some good reviews, and then justify the CapEx on the winery itself. So yeah, there's these newer projects. Napa Valley, notorious for this as well. You go in there, it's a gorgeous tasting room. It's $100 for the tasting flight. Just make sure that it's worth the money. And I would say there's some I call them soft caps in terms of value.
Mhm.
And, economically, you think about a place like Spain versus a place like California. Spain, rich, long winemaking history. Same with California. Not quite as long as Spain, but in California, the land's expensive, the labor is expensive.
Yeah.
In Spain, the land is cheap and the labor is cheap. So, it's some easy math to see where the value is. Unfortunately, you are going to have, if it's an investment wine, you have to sell the wine again, right? So Spanish wine, not quite as popular on the global scale as, the heavy hitters in Bordeaux and Burgundy and Napa. But, there's definitely some buyers out there. And the savvy wine person will know of, wineries like Vega Siciliana and, the top dogs in Ribeiro de Douro. Great wines, definitely sellable, but
Sure. Now, how do you
yeah.
resell it? So let's say I've made this investment and I want people to know that I own this wine. How do I find the buyer for it?
It's I would say most commonly done just privately
Is it really?
listed. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I've got friends
there's
that's
definitely
all they do is they buy wine and they do make a killing at it.
yep.
But they just have connections. I've never thought to ask him how do you get your, how do you find the wine? But I suppose it's just through connections.
Well, the the normal channels, the really savvy investor will go, okay, I know I can get this cheaper from the winery, or I can get it cheaper from my distributor, and they're just not going to pay that price
Sure.
for it, right? So if you're going to, typically you'll save some money doing it privately, and there are some services that do it, but then you're factoring in the fee, and
Yeah.
it
Starts
is
adding
what it
up.
is. It's funny. Wine is most often traded, at least from my perspective, in estate sales. So, a lot of people hold on to the stuff and they just, they collect it and they don't
Yeah,
drink it. And, that's where some really good deals are found. But
I'm sure.
yeah, it's a lot of knowing the right people,
I would
get in
think if
touch
you
with
go
your
into a higher end
distributors. So,
restaurant, and I'm sure people hit you up when you're doing the sommelier thing, is you talk to a sommelier. They would
yeah.
probably know people that'd love to buy this stuff.
Oh,
You know?
oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, they're talking wine all day, every
Yeah.
day.
They'll know where
Um,
to go.
yeah, go and find one you like too.
Mhm.
There's lots of sommeliers out there, and some of them are a little more people focused, and some of them are a little more wine nerds.
Yeah.
So pick the one that knows the people.
Yeah.
The distributors though are great to know. It's quick Google search away. You pick your winery and you say in my area, and typically it pops up who's distributing them, and call them up and say, hey, look, I have a bunch of these wines. Do you want to buy it? Maybe,
Mhm.
there is a chance that happens because older vintages, there's only so much of the wine,
Sure.
and it gets drunk and it diminishes and it gets more valuable over time. Funny note on that one is Lafite 82, the most prestigious wine probably ever. A lot of people think there is no Lafite 82 left. It's all been drunk and everything out there is fake. So,
Yeah.
but
It's just sitting in people's storage, I'm sure.
yeah,
A lot of it. Um, as far as let's talk about diversification. In real estate, we're always saying, diversify your assets. And right now, if you're hoping if you have a little bit of office, you have some multifamily or industrial to go with it, right? But
yeah,
now, as far as the wines, is it smart to invest certain amounts in different regions and different types of wine?
yeah. Well, if
Yeah.
you're on a vint or a buying program yearly, you're signed up with the wineries, and touch on the first episode too. It's for the prestigious wineries, it's like buying a Ferrari. You can't just go in there and get the new release. You
Right.
need to be on the wine club, and probably there's a waiting list for the wine club. Cayuse Cayuse in Washington, something like thousands of people show up to the winery for the new release, and there's a huge long wait list for their wines.
Yeah.
So that's what you're dealing with. But if you can get on to those yearly buying programs where you get a case a year or 2 cases a year, diversify by spreading out the impact of the vintage. So fires, for example, in California, there's a winery in Sokoblosters didn't produce vintage this year. So you'll never know what the weather's going to do. Yeah. But if you're spread across the world, hopefully you'll get one good vintage in one area. Earlier I talked about focusing on a region. Well, you could approach it this way. You pick 3 wineries in a region and you go to the next region and you say, okay, that's my portfolio for, BC. Yep. That's my portfolio for Australia. I like these. In terms of what you're buying at the winery, the most consistent year-over-year appreciation wines will be the top tier wines. And I would, for the most part, solely focus on those because they will be the rarest and the hardest to get. The lower tier wines, there could be some value in there too, especially when it comes to drinking them. But if you're purely talking investment, the top tier wines are the ones to go for. And just for those who may not be aware, most wineries produce wine in tiers. So just think, all the fruit available, you take the best fruit and you make your best wine with the best fruit, and you're really selective on picking and where the vineyards are. And maybe you don't even make that wine on bad vintages, but on good years, you'll have lots of fruit, but it might not all be the same quality. So you got your top wine, all your best fruits in there, your second wine, your good fruits in there from your good vineyards, and then your lower tier ones are, not the best terroir, but it's well made, it's whatnot, and you're still worthy of the brand, but it's intended to be table wine.
I had no idea they did that.
Yeah, and you'll see it's the same format for almost all wineries. And the bigger the production, the less tiers you'll find. Just because the brand's important. So if you're going to put the label on it, sometimes they'll even make a sub brand for the lower tier stuff, and the higher tier stuff will have its own winery. And so they're completely disconnected because people don't want to associate, say, well, it's funny. There's famous one would be Peller. He makes a ton of wine. But, he also makes really good wine too. He does associate his name with both, but some people choose to split it off. So yeah, it's definitely, if you're a collector, focus on the top tier stuff, maybe go down to the second tier, but, pick your 3 wineries or your 5 wineries from a region, sign up with the wine club, get on that yearly buying rate. It does suck if you can't leave the wine club and come back the next year if you don't think the vintage is going to be good. So you are kind of stuck on the program, but that's your risk for getting the
part of your investment, to get to play and get out there with it, you're going to have to pay. You have to join the wine club. Wine clubs aren't that expensive though, are they?
Typically not. Typically it's just committing to buying a case of wine a year, sometimes more. Every winery is different. Some wineries don't have wine clubs, but typically the well-established ones, you won't get the new release, and it's purely available through resale, and distributors will be allocated, 2 cases, maybe 1 case, right? Depends how good the relationship is. Right. And those wines will sell. You can sell those wines to restaurants. You just got to know the buyers in your area. But restaurants are another good buyer for wine. The law has changed from state to state, province to province in terms of direct reselling. It's pretty tricky here in BC, so you probably have to go through. You might not even be able to sell it, to be honest.
I can see that. They might step in if they don't know where the wine came from for sure, or if it's real. Well, unless they know you, I guess. Maybe if you've been an established investor, but yeah, I can see that they would regulate that. But Michael, this has been some great news. I know I was planning on a 12 to 15 minute video, and we're going strong, but I think we'll continue this. And why don't you tell everybody about what you're doing now up in BC?
Yeah, so I'm still going strong in industrial. Have a bunch of buyer clients looking to look for development space out here. So if you have any land you own, let me know. I could have a buyer for you.
There you
But
go.
besides that, it's just a lovely week in Vancouver. I think we're raining until April 26th or something like that. So
Good Lord. You
yeah,
can keep it. I've had enough down here in LA, but all right. Well, and then Michael was a sommelier before. If you have wine questions, I'm going to put his contact information down below so you can reach out to him for real estate and for wine. Michael, thank you very much for coming on.
yeah. Thanks again for having me, Joe.
You
And until
bet.
next time.
You betcha. And for those of you watching, make sure you give us a like. And if you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe.